Shepherd's pie is one of those dishes that makes so much sense that you wonder how it took so long to combine these two ideas, meat and potatoes. And I'm guessing that people had been doing this for a long time before it was ever documented and before we know that, but I'm not sure. Whatever the case is, this is a dish that crosses cultures. Every culture, it seems like, has their version of what shepherd's pie is. Of course, you put meat and you put potatoes on a plate side by side, and it's delicious. It's really great. But when you combine those two and put them together into one dish, something magical happens. Now, I don't know what name you all know this dish by, because depending on where you're from, you're gonna call it something different. Now, the two that I found that are most popular in European cultures are shepherd's pie and cottage pie. And some people will tell you it's the same thing. Some people will tell you it's different. Some people will say, well, one has lamb or mutton and one has beef. And you know, I think that overall, whatever meat is available to them, especially in the time period, and then mashed potatoes, and that's what they're doing. And it's really kind of difficult in the time period to even find something called mashed potatoes. There are a few books that have a recipe for mashed potatoes, but usually they just say something like cook potatoes and then combine it with butter, or combine it with cream or something like that. It doesn't seem like it was something that they were eating all of the time, at least in the early 18th century, but by the late 18th century, this is really catching on. With a shepherd's pie, one of the most important things is to mince your meat very well. We don't want to have big chunks of meat in this. We want every bite to feel like everything is equally distributed, because you've got this super soft, cushiony, smooth mashed potato on top, and then the meat gives you some texture, but you want that to spread out very evenly. I've talked to folks now that ask me about the word mince, and mince in the time period, even now in certain circumstances, just means to chop up very small. And we see minced meat mentioned a lot in the 18th century. And mincemeat pie is something that is very popular, and it still is. It's something that people connect to holidays. And so they understand that what we're doing here is we're taking this and we're chopping it up into small little pieces, almost like we're gonna make ground beef or something like hamburger here. Now, potatoes in our time period are a real hot button issue. For a long time, people did not feel safe to eat potatoes, and they're part of the nightshades family, so there are questions there. But once they kind of discovered potatoes, they were all the rage. They were crazy because finally they had a really good answer to poor people food, but also an ingredient that rich people loved. And so this just kind of took over. And so we see lots of papers in our time period that are being written about potatoes being revolutionary, and they're switching from things like rutabaga and different root vegetables. They're saying potatoes all the way. You can cook them so many different ways. They spread so far. They're super cheap and they're super filling. And so poor people food, as far as how the government or different organizations that were trying to feed the hungry were switching to potatoes. One of the things that we see in Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, Scrooge gets some street food, and then he's worried that maybe he had a bad piece of potato. We see even in literature where potatoes are kind of taken over and they're feeding the masses. So this is a dish that I'm sure can be elevated and made very fancy. And in a modern sense, you'll even see it usually with something like carrots and peas mixed in. I would like to know in the comment section where you come from, how you make shepherd's pie. What do you put in there? Because I've seen all sorts of things, and I've seen mushrooms in there, I've seen different things, but this one is simple, this one is bare bones, and it's one of the very first documented versions. Today's recipe comes from Maria Rundell's A New System of Domestic Cookery. It was published first in 1806, and in this book, it's to make Sanders, or Saunders, as some people say. I don't know this recipe connected to that word in any other context than this book. Maybe you do, maybe you grew up calling shepherd's pie Sanders, I don't know. But at any rate, this is what it is. This recipe is called, to dress ditto, called Sanders. Mince small beef or mutton, onion, pepper, and salt, and a little gravy put into scallop shells or saucers. Make them 3 parts full, then fill them up with potatoes mashed with a little cream. Put a bit of butter on top and brown them in an oven or before the fire. In a modern sense, this dish is perfect for the day where you come home from work and your kids are hungry. You have no idea what dinner is going to be, but you got to whip something up quick. This will get you there and everybody will love it. The first thing that you want to do in this context is cook the potatoes, because they're going to take the longest. So you're going to peel your potatoes, cut them up small, and then you're going to get them into boiling water to get them soft. While they're boiling, you're gonna take your meat and you're gonna mince it up. And mince this up really fine. You don't have to go, crazy. It doesn't have to be a paste or something like that. But you want this to be really small. Once you have your meat all minced up, you're gonna go ahead and peel a couple of onions and you're gonna mince those up too. And you want that to be about the same size as the meat that you've gone ahead and cut up. Go ahead and season everything with salt and pepper and get it into a skillet. Now, if you can't create a good gravy with the meat and the onions that you have there because it's too lean or something like that, you can add a little bit of broth, but we're gonna create a gravy with this mixture. Now, she calls for you to put this into little saucers, which we will do today. But if you're in a hurry at home, you can just make this all in the skillet, because once you take your potatoes out of the water, you add your cream and you mash those up. Make sure you season those. And then you can just put all of that on top of the meat that's already in the skillet. You don't have to dirty a lot of dishes. That's another thing that's wonderful about this particular recipe. At that point, you're gonna get it in the oven until the potatoes start to brown up on top. In this case, you're gonna put it into little saucers in the same fashion, and then you can either use an oven or just brown them around the fire. I was reading this book from the late 18th century, and then there were pieces from this lady that was advocating for potatoes. She was from Lancashire, and she was saying that this hasn't really gone into the interior of the kingdom yet. People don't understand potatoes, but she's just telling them, listen, you've got to take another look at potatoes. This is the future. This is something that's super versatile, super easy to grow. And you see things like, she describes the Irish are eating porridges with potato and buttermilk, and that oftentimes people that can afford better are still asking for that dish because they enjoy it so much. Meanwhile, there are other people that are making dishes where they've got sliced potatoes and then they're cooking that underneath a piece of meat that's cooking, and it's spinning and the drippings are coming. And we see that, okay, we got mashed potatoes over here, we've got meat juice and potatoes here, and we see the workings coming together for what we now know as shepherd's pie. They just haven't put all the pieces together yet. As we know now, potatoes are, I grew up in the Midwest. This is potato country. It's pretty uncommon to have a meal where a potato isn't present in one way or form, especially when I was growing up. So I think that she was right as far as not just her country, but most of the world is growing potatoes, and they're using that to stretch their food as much as possible. Even in shepherd's pie, it's topping everything off. So if you take a vessel and you fill it 2/3 full with meat, and then you top it off with potatoes, it makes it fuller, it makes it fattier, and it makes you feel like you're having this complete idea, but you're also not using nearly as much meat. Here's our shepherd's pie, and it looks really, really good. There wasn't a ton of butter in this one, but there was a ton of cream, so there's a lot of fat content in there, but I don't know. I think that this is still a dish that you could make on a super cheap budget. You just don't have to have all that fat, and it would be a good pour dish, or as we can see, it can be elevated and it can go on a super rich person's table and they would really enjoy it. So I'm gonna miss the pockets of peas and carrots that I'm used to, but we're gonna give this a shot. Dang. If I may say so, I seasoned that perfectly. I really lucked out on this one. That's so good. This is stupendous. You guys should make it at home. If you have, what I don't have, a little bit of mushroom ketchup at your house, go ahead and put that in there too. It'll make it sing. I'm out right now, but this is fantastic. Go try it.